Let's take a look at the things that make the IoT gateway a BACnet device. The web setup is identical for the model MQ73 versus the BB37301 MQ. The only difference is going to be the picture on the home page. So when we first log in, it's going to ask for a username, which should be root, and the password will be the unique password you find either on a label on the device or on a piece of paper in the box it came in. When we go to the BACnet settings page, this is one of the important pages you want to take a look at early on. Every BACnet device on the network needs a unique device instance. You set that here. The BACnet IP port is generally going to be 47808. The device object name needs to be something unique on the network. There should be no other device on the network that has this object name. The rest of this information kind of doesn't matter a whole lot. Most of these parameters will default to something useful. Set your MSTP baud rate. MSTP MAC address is kind of important. Make sure that is not duplicated elsewhere on the network. And max masters is important as well, but that's usually going to default to 127. The other couple of settings that are important are the network numbers. You have two network numbers since this is a router. The IP network number and the MSTP network number. And those should be unique, and all devices on the same physical link should have the same network number. And if there's another network connected through a different router, these network numbers must be unique so that no network number is duplicated on different segments of the network. The routing in the IoT gateway is going to default to not enabled. Here we see that routing is fully enabled. So in a lot of cases you're going to want to use the IoT gateway simply as a gateway. If you do want to use it as a router, then come in here and check these boxes and save the configuration. The other thing that's important is come over here to the network setup page and assign an IP address. You do have the option of using DHCP. That's what automatic would mean here. But most often you're probably going to have a static IP address, and this is where you set it. The other thing that's important to have set up is a DNS server, especially if you're going to have the IoT gateway looking for Amazon. You need a DNS server in order for the gateway to find Amazon. And let's scroll down a little bit here and you see an NTP server. This is how the gateway finds out what time it is, and this is also important since the security certificates for Amazon will not work correctly if you do not have the correct time of day. And also, if you're going to be using the scheduler, you want to set the latitude and longitude so that it can come up with the correct time for sunrise and sunset. And the rest of these settings are a little more detailed. You can check those out in the user guide. Now initially, your IoT gateway is going to have a default set of some minimum number of BACnet objects. And come over here to the local objects page, and this is where you can take a look at your objects that are currently defined. You may want to allocate additional objects or a different set of objects. And to do that, come over here to the resources page. And this is where you set the number of each different type of object that you wish to have. And if you want to change these numbers, you put in the numbers that you would like instead. Click check, commit, and then restart the device so that your new counts will take effect at that point. When you make changes, the majority of the changes that you're going to make are going to be saved in an XML file. To save those changes, you come over here to the file manager, select your current file, and like that. And select save and hit execute. When the device boots up, the file named in this window right here is going to be the configuration file that it loads automatically and begins to operate from. If you wish to change that file, again, you would select a different file name and come down here and select a different auto-config file for boot up and click execute to make that take effect. So there's a couple different ways that the IoT gateway can access BACnet information. The one is the gateway itself has a bunch of BACnet objects, and other BACnet devices can read and write these objects. And the other option is we come over to the BACnet client and tell our client about other devices that are on the BACnet network, and then set up some read and write maps. And this is where we tell it we want to read analog input 1, for example, from this device, which was set up in the devices page, and save that in our local analog input 1. And this is how we go about retrieving data from other BACnet devices. And this is all talked about in much greater detail in, there's actually a full video just on the BACnet client, as well as a couple of chapters in the user guide. So that wraps up our general BACnet overview. Again, there are additional videos to look at for various features in more detail, as well as a detailed user guide to take a look at.